to England and double that from most other countries. So then we come to the Home Rule Bill in 1912, and this is my opinion for all it's worth. The British military elite were completely opposed to the Third Irish Home Rule Bill in 1912, something that had already been granted to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. They decided to block it using every means possible by discrediting and undermining John Redmond and the Irish Parliamentary Party. This included in March 1914, the Curragh Mutiny, when British officers refused to go north to disarm the Ulster Volunteers. August 1914, when Kitchener, from near Listowel, guaranteed exclusion for the Northern counties from Home Rule if they provided an Ulster division in World War I, which ensured partition. The swift execution of the 1916 leaders, which turned the Irish population pro-Republican, followed by a campaign to provoke and intimidate the Irish population, and finally the threat of conscription. By 1918, Redmond died a broken man and the Irish Parliamentary Party was no more. They then decided to pick a fight with Michael Collins in the IRA. This included an additional 30,000 soldiers, 7,000 black and tans, and 3,000 auxiliaries. So now I'd like to concentrate tonight on Clare. So this project was two parts. One was to build a memorial, which was built in 2016, three panels with three silhouettes, one of a Tommy, one of an Anzac, and one of a Doughboy. Over 700 names. The memorial stone and benches are all made of Portland stone. Ciara McNamara was the driving force behind this. His father, Peter, was very involved as well. My job was more for the Clare Library and in showing and putting on the Clare Library website what was involved with all the Clare involvement in the war. And there's 30 booklets, believe it or not, there on the Clare Library website for anybody to download. They're in booklet form, you can print them out. But what I want to show you tonight basically is that Claremen were involved in all various armies, Australian, New Zealand, Canadian, French. They were in all the Irish regiments. They then were in the Royal Flying Corps, the Tank Corps, the Navy, the Machine Corps. They fought in all the great battles and died at Etru, Rue-de-Bois, the Ypres, Flanders, Gallipoli, Loos, on the Somme, Salonika, Mesopotamia, which as we know is Iraq. And then I'd like to obviously talk about Killaloe Ballina. And then I'll give you a timeline for the Claremen and women who died in the Great War to the green fields of France. And finally, I'll give you a little video clip on the Menegate Memorial in Ypres, which is one of the most beautiful memorials in the world, and where 31 Claremen are named. But firstly, I'd just like to give you a whistle-stop tour of how World War I started. A Serbian goes to Sarajevo, he kills the Crown Prince. The Hungarians, who didn't like the Serbians anyway, declare war. The Russians back the Serbians, the French back the Russians. The Germans then decide to side with Austria-Hungary, or the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as it was called. So now what you have is 3.5 million Russians, 3.5 million Germans, and 3.5 million French. The Germans are now fighting on two fronts, which they don't like. Across here in GBNI, there is 100,000 troops. It's called the British Expeditionary Force. I might add there's another 1 million in the British Navy. So what happens is that the Germans had planned, they wanted to bring the World War I to fight on one front. So they wanted to finish off France quickly. So as the Germans do, they had it all organized to do it in 42 days. Now the Germans mobilized 3.5 million soldiers in less than 3 days. So they were prepared for war, believe me. So their plan was to cross into Belgium, down into Paris, 42 days, not 41, not 43, 42 days, close this, finish off at France, and then go across to take on Russia. Now, to do this, they assumed two things. They assumed that the Belgians would not resist, and they had an army of 117,000, and that Great Britain and Ireland would not enter the war because of the situation in Ireland at the time. The situation in Ireland at the time was that the Ulster Volunteers were arming, and with 30,000 German rifles, and then the Southern, or the Irish National Volunteers were also arming as well. And there was more, in the British press at the time, they were more worried about a civil war in Ireland than they were about a war in Europe. However, on the 4th of August, the Belgians did resist the invasion. They held them back for 19 days. And John Redmond, who momentarily held the fate of Europe in his hands, agreed to defer Home Rule, thus averting any possibility of a civil war. And so Great Britain, on the night, 12 o'clock on the night of the 4th of August, declared war on Germany, and the British Expeditionary Force, the 100,000 troops, were sent to France. There were 5 fields of warfare. There was the Western Front, which is here. There is Gallipoli, which is here. The reason they went to Gallipoli was to take out Constantinople, or Istanbul as we know, and then allow the Russians to come through into the Mediterranean. There was Salonika. The reason they went to Salonika was purely to prevent the Bulgarians from taking over Serbia. By the time they got to Salonika, it was too late. There was Palestine, which is here. The reason Palestine was a war zone was purely because the Turks wanted to block the Suez Canal. And finally, there's Mesopotamia, which is over here somewhere, Iraq. And the reason that was important was because the Turks wanted to get to India, the jewel on the crown. So now we come to Belgium. The Germans, 500,000 of them, swept across Belgium. The Belgians courageously burned, or literally destroyed all their bridges, destroyed all the rail lines, destroyed all their roads, put up a defense as much as possible. And then they flooded all their dikes here. And that made Ypres incredibly important. Now, the reason the Germans wanted Ypres throughout the entire war, 3 big battles were fought there, is that Ypres was the gateway to the British for the ports here, the French ports. Without the French ports, the war would have ended. So their aim was to take these ports and, of course, to take Paris. So what happened is that the British Expeditionary Force moved across. Now, I have to tell you, I have to give you who ran the British Expeditionary Force. 2 people, Sir John French. Now, John French was Anglo-Irish. He opposed Home Rule. He participated in the Clare Mutiny in 1919. The IRA attempted to assassinate him. He survived. And then in 1920, he proposed that the RAF straf and bomb in Ireland. Second in command was Sir Henry Wilson, again Anglo-Irish. He opposed Home Rule. Again, he supported an armed insurrection in Ulster in 1913. He also supported the Clare Mutiny. And he proposed in 1919 that a little bloodletting was needed in Ireland. He was killed by the IRA in 1922 in London. So back to World War I. So what happened is that basically the British Expeditionary Force reached Mons on the 23rd of August, 19 days after the Germans had come into Belgium. Now that was absolutely critical. So when the British Expeditionary Force met them, they met them at Mons. It was on a canal. They were streaming across. One of the bravest men there was a man from Cool, County Meath. His name was Morris Dease. And he was killed on one of those bridges defending it. And he was awarded posthumously the first Irish Victoria Cross in the war. There were 36 others. So now we'll just go to, I hope the picture's okay now. So we'll just go to the different armies that the Claremen fought with. In 1914, there were 5 million people in Australia. That was their population. 210 Claremen fought with the Australians, 41 died. With New Zealand, there was a 1 million population, 10 Claremen fought with them, 8 died. And then with Canada, 137 Claremen fought and 14 died. Now, this is just to give you a brief and a quick, literally just a look at all the numbers. We can't go into detail, but all these people fought with the Australians. And the medals, this is the Distinguished Conduct Medal. The amount of medals won by Claremen is just enormous. Second only to the Victoria Cross. I'm just going to, you can see all this now if you go online. And again, as I say, it's just to give you hopefully a handle on the numbers involved. These are all Claremen who fought with the Anzacs and Canadians and the awards that they received for gallantry. So now we come to the French. Jacques Barrett fought with the French army. He was in the Foreign Legion. He was killed in action in 1917. He's actually the brother of Frank Barrett, who was the commander of the IRA the Clare Brigade, and Joe Barrett, who was the leader of the Mid-Clare Brigade Flying Column. There were Claremen with the South African Army and the Indian Army. But of course, this is, we could spend a whole night discussing the US Army and the Clare involvement. But basically, when Pershing landed in France, this is him landing in France in 1917, the US Army only had 250,000 men. But within a year, as the Americans do, they had nearly 5 million men trained, armed, and all the transport, all the gear, et cetera, only the Americans could do that. So anyway, 400 Claremen fought with the Americans in World War I. 43 died. They were in 33 of the 43 US infantry divisions. Now, this is the Distinguished Service Cross, only second to the Medal of Honor. 5 men from Clare have won the Medal of Honor. One of them won it twice, but that was back in the Indian Wars, and the rest of them were in the American Civil War. 3 Claremen won the Distinguished Service Cross in World War I. So down below here we have James Browne. He died of wounds. His brother, Sean, was one of the Clare Hunger Strikers in 1917. These are the 17 battles that the Americans fought in. The first few were very small, then they got the hang of it. Some of them then were defensive, and then they went on to attack. The last one, they had 1.2 million soldiers in the big push at the end of the war. They lost 110,000, and believe it or not, up to half of them were killed by the Spanish flu. So again, this is just a brief picture, just to give you the scale. Again, another distinguished cross by Cornelius O'Brien from Ennistimon. Another one from Captain Thomas Henry. And all these are men who fought with the Americans. So we'll just go through them quickly, if you don't mind. And we will just get to the 69th, the famous 69th Regiment, the Irish regiment that fought in the Civil War, fought virtually in all the battles there, but the famous ones were Antietam, Fredericksburg, and Gettysburg. They were seriously wiped out in some of those. And then, sorry about this now, two Claremen I'd like to mention who fought with the Americans. One was Peter Vaughan. He took part in the Benin ambush. He was the man who threw the 2 grenades. And then Liam Hawke, he was a Marine. The Marines were definitely the toughest of all the American fighters. They took part in the hardest battles. Château Thierry and Billerwood would be the most difficult ones. He became the adjutant of the West Clare Brigade. Now, it's very unusual, but in New York, only over the last few hundred years, New York City has designated 54 honorary squares. Only 7 of them have been named after war heroes. And one of them is named after Timothy Donnellan. Now, he must have only picked randomly as the representative of the 69th because thousands of Irishmen fought with them, but they picked on him. And he's from County Clare. Unfortunately, he died in the war. And this is a square in New York that they named after him. And they, as I say, they only named 7 squares in New York after war heroes. So now we come to Claremen in the Great Britain and Irish forces. A total number of 206,000 Irishmen served with the GB&I forces in World War I. 58,000 had already been enlisted, either or already in the British Army or in the reserves. 148,000 were volunteers, and of those, 24,000 were Redmond National Volunteers and 26,000 were Ulster Volunteers. The rest were new recruits. And in the war, 4,000 Claremen fought. 3,000 of them were in the British forces, and 1,000 were with the US, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand forces. This is Ireland, 1914, a veritable war machine. Clare's here, and we're in the Royal Munster Fusilier area, and the Royal Munster Fusiliers were based in Tralee. Connacht Rangers were based in Galway. Royal Irish Regiment, which includes Ballina, was based in Clonmel, and they're all the other Irish regiments. And then, of course, there's the Irish Guards. So I'll just go through them as simply as I can. but there was 810 Claremen in the Royal Munster Fusiliers. At least 184 of them died. Initially, the Royal Munster Fusiliers was just the 1st and 2nd Battalion, with the 3rd to 5th as the reserve, but obviously during the war, they added an extra 5 battalions. And their booklets and all these, there's a booklet on the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd to 10th on the Clare Library website, if you get a chance to do it, to take a look. So again, I just want to give you the scope. I've popped in a few. Michael White, during the Renine reprisals, during the by the 2nd Battalion, the Royal Scots, the Black and Tans, PJ Lennon was bringing a bucket of water to put out one of the fires. He was dragged to the square and then to Parliament Street, where he was shot outside the courthouse. Michael White, believe it or not, was in a nearby bar, went out to the street to find PJ. They were about to shoot him as well, but when he showed them his British Army tattoo and asked them where they were in 1916, they quietened down. They let him take PJ's body then, or he was still alive, to Jason Lane, and then he died. So these are all Ennis names. Ennis Diamond, we're in Mike Roach here. He was killed in the Civil War. Again, more names. This is Killaloe. This is Thomas O'Loughlin. He was from Milton Malbay. He was killed in action in Rudaboy, a very famous battle on Arbor Ridge. His brother was John O'Loughlin, who was killed at Canada Cross. This is Kilrush, no less. Sorry, this is Kilrush. All these are Kilrushmen who fought with the Royal Munster Fusiliers, and it goes on and on. This is John Cuneen. And then again, all these medals are Distinguished Conduct medals. Again, 2nd to the Victoria Cross, incredibly difficult. You have to be incredibly brave to win these. I've highlighted Joe Clancy, a legend in the East Clare Brigade. He joined the Munster Fusiliers with his neighbour, Martin McNamara, in 1916. And during the operations near La Catalette on the 4th of October 1918, he showed great gallantry and contempt for danger when his company was being much harassed by machine gun fire from a distance of about 400 yards. Entirely on his own initiative and in company with only one man, he rushed forward under cover of a smoke bomb and charged the machine gun, killing the whole of the team and capturing the gun, which he brought back to his company. And for that, then he was given the Distinguished Conduct Medal. He went on, as I say, to join the East Clare Brigade and went on hunger strike in Wormwood Scrubs in 1920. All these again are Distinguished Conduct Medals. Ralph Gorman, Thomas Howley, Peter Loftus, Joseph O'Shea. Again, I've just highlighted Tom Bentley here because he featured, he was another very brave man. He featured, he was awarded the military medal. And then he featured in the Meelick train ambush in 1921, where Michael Leeson and Christian McCarthy were killed. Then there's John Keane down below. This is the military cross, this is the military medal. The officers got the military cross, the ranks got the military medal. Again, incredibly difficult medal to receive. So I just want to go through again. So this is just the last lot of the Royal Munster Fusiliers. This is what's called mentioned in dispatches. You don't get a medal. Again, a very important award, but you get an oak leaf that you can put on your victory medal around the ribbon of your victory medal. Brought in Sergeant Major Doyle at the end. He was awarded the Victoria Cross. He was from New Ross, and he became the intelligence officer for the Mid-Clare Brigade. So now we're in the Royal Irish Regiment based in Clonmel, and again, all the names and all the medals won. I've just popped in Henry Lafoy here, based in Killaloe, and he was the recruiting officer in Killaloe and enlisted 112 men. This is a letter by Dennis Halloran from Tulla. He was in the Royal Irish Regiment, and after he came home to, after the war was ended, his home, he was in London at the time, his home was ransacked in Tulla by the soldiers from the Oxford and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry and the RIC in December 1920. This is the letter he wrote. And he wrote this letter to the General Strickland, who was in command in 1921 of the 6th Division in Cork. But at the time, during the World War I, he was the commander of the 1st Infantry Division, and Dennis Hallinan fought under him. And he says, "My Lord, I hope you will pardon me for writing you this letter in taking the liberty in doing so. I wish to let you know I'm an ex-soldier who fought under your command in France and Flanders. You gave me and my comrades your word that we were fighting for justice and liberty at the time, and I thought so too. I was finally rendered useless at the Battle of Cambrai. I was demobilized on around the 7th of March, 1919. I went for a rest to my father's home in County Clare. There I left my uniform, which I fought under your worship's command. I'm now in receipt of information from my brother regarding at this following address, which he gives, that on December the 20th at 12 midnight, the soldiers in RSC called him from his bed and ransacked the house and found nothing of importance. They willfully robbed him of his watch, a chain, and £6 in a box, which was used for farm use, and also robbed me of my uniform, which I fought under your command. Is this what I fought for? I never knew the Prussians to do so, and I fought for 4 years against them. I sincerely appeal to your honor to right this willful wrong if possible." And then he gives the names of the people involved in the raid. The RSC and Army replied, and at the end of their letter, they said, "I've no doubt that these allegations are made to bring the police and the military of Tulla into disrepute. I do not believe this. D. Hallinan is entitled to append the letters DCM and MM after his name." And of course, they got a letter back saying that he was awarded those medals. So we'll come to the Royal Irish Rifles, and then the Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers. Again, Michael Maloney, his brother, was killed in the Civil War. And sorry now. Not sure why that's not. Oh, yes. So this is really all the others then in the Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers, the Leinster Regiment, and again, all the medals they won. This is another one I'd like to show you. These two brothers were killed in World War I. Joseph Curry killed in action on the 5th of October, 1917 in Passchendaele, and Thomas Curry was killed in action near Cambrai. And then on the 21st of October, 1920, Lance Corporal Alexander McPherson of the 2nd Royal Scots and member of the RSC attacked members of his family before going on to kill a 75-year-old Charles Lynch. This is taken from Edward Lynch's witness statement, and it says, "The taller soldier's name was McPherson. In no time, he accompanied a mixed party of military and RSC from the village. They began firing in all directions, wounding a farm labourer named O'Grady, who was out working. They badly beat up members of a family called Curry, who were of ex-British soldier stock and had no connection whatever with either the IRA or Sinn Féin." So we're in the Royal Munster Fusiliers. Again, all these are men who fought, all these are Clement, and they're the medals they were awarded. Again, we have Killaloe, and then it would, we're in the Connacht Rangers here. We'd have to mention Joe Hawes. Again, while on leave in 1920, he heard about and witnessed the activities of the British Army and the Black and Tans during the War of Independence. He returned to India, became an instigator of what became known as the Connacht Rangers Mutiny on 29th of June 1920, when he led a number of Irish soldiers against British atrocities in Ireland. He and 16 other Irish soldiers were court-martialed and sentenced to death. However, only one was executed, and Joe's sentence was commuted to life. This is another Clareman who was also involved in that mutiny. So we're now coming to the Royal Irish Fusiliers. This actually was a man who fought with the Dublin Fusiliers. He ended up in Roger Casement's Irish Brigade. We're in the Irish Guards. Again, military medals, distinguished contact medals. We have to mention Ignatius O'Neill. He commanded the volunteers in the Renine ambush on the 22nd of September 1920. Tom Curry, another very brave Clare man. Alone was awarded the DCM, but he also was mentioned in dispatches as well. Again, more distinguished conduct medals, military crosses, military medals.
Oh, you have it.
Again, we're in the Irish Guards. We're in the Irish Guards again now.
No, thanks a million, Judy. Thank you very much. That's great.
So we're in the English regiments now, and without doubt, the most accomplished.
Hillary, you need to mute yours now.
Mute what? What?
So we're in the English regiments now, and without doubt, the most decorated man from Killaloe was Colonel R.G. Parker. I think they all speak for themselves. He also fought in the Boer War, and he ended up as a brigadier general in 1918, a colonel in 1919. Again, these are more Claremen who fought with English regiments. It's one of my favorites here, but great story on him, but I'll give you that another time maybe. This is Patrick Hartigan. His brother was killed in the Civil War. These are the Claremen who fought with the Scottish regiments, with the Welsh regiments. And now we're in the British Navy. You have to understand the British Navy was enormous. They had 32 dreadnoughts. The cost of a dreadnought, you could build a town or a city nearly. The Germans only had 16. There was only one major battle in World War I. That was at the Battle of Jutland. And 11,000 Irishmen were in the British Navy in World War I. So these are the Claremen now. Again, I can't go through all of them, but if you wish to go through them, they're all in the booklet on the Clare Library website. This man is tragic now. Not alone did he die on the HMS Laurentic, but his son died, his eldest son died. He was killed in action in the Battle of Hulloch. And then that wasn't bad enough. Another son, Martin, was killed. He was pro-treaty in the Civil War. So now we're, again, all these are men in the British Navy, and these again are all the awards. And again, I can't go through them, but if you want to go into detail, I mean, this is Lieutenant Commander Cray in 1915. The Clare Journal described how he used his destroyer, the HMS Ariel, to ram and sink a German submarine. Then these more men in the British Navy, these are all the battleships, destroyers, cruisers, dreadnoughts that they were on. This was a tragic battle where it was in 1914 off the coast of Chile. These two ships were completely outgunned by German battleships, which were much more modern. The Germans were chasing after these two. These two turned around, unfortunately, and decided to face them. And that was that. They were both sunk. It was brutal. And all hands on deck were killed, 1,570, including all these Claremen. So again, there were Claremen on submarines, there were Claremen on aircraft carriers, and of course, if I was talking about submarines, it'd be impossible not to mention John Philip Holland, the man who figured out how to get submarines underwater without poisoning yourself. And he'd invented the gasoline engine above the surface and the electric motors below it. And of course, within 40 days of his death in 1914, the lethal potency of Holland's creation was to unveil itself. One single submarine, one day alone, turned a small area of the North Sea coast of the Dutch coast because into a massive humanity when it claimed over 1,400 lives and the sinking of 3 British light cruisers sunk by a German submarine. So merchant navy, incredibly important in World War I as it was in World War II. A huge amount of Claremen in the merchant navy. And again, I won't go into it, but these are them. A lot of them died. Then we're in the Royal Flying Corps. Royal Flying Corps amalgamated with the Navy Flying Corps to form the RAF in 1918, but it was called the Royal Flying Corps up till then. These were all pilots. The average life of a pilot in World War I was less than 7 days. 13,000 of them died in World War I, and half them died in accidents. They were lethal machines for the pilots. This is a famous man from Clare, Major Tim Clune, who flew with the Royal Flying Corps. He actually had an encounter with the redoubtable von Richthofen, or the Red Baron, where his observer was killed. And then in 1921, he joined the Free State National Army. His sister Susan was Michael Collins' girlfriend. And it's said that he wrote the poem 1916 for her. Then we had Claremen in the Tank Corps, Claremen in the artillery, Claremen still in the artillery. The war really was about the artillery fighting each other, but the soldiers in between. And the World War I was all about winning ridges and hills. And virtually every battle was for a ridge or a hill, because then you could park your artillery up there and pepper the enemy down below. So again, lots of artillery from Clare, machine gun corps. I mentioned just Thomas Coonan because he's the granduncle of Miles Duncan. I'm actually doing a diploma at the moment in modern history on the revolution in Clare, and Miles is my lecturer. We have Claremen in the cavalry, Claremen in the Medical Corps, and more in the Medical Corps, and then, of course, lots of Claremen involved in World War I. This lady, Mary O'Connor Bianconi, was awarded the Military Medal. And again, these are all the different aspects of World War I, and which women were involved. Nellie Galvin, she was also awarded, she was a nurse, also awarded the Military Medal. The hospital was being bombed that she was working in, and she showed enormous coolness and bravery. She went on to, she's from the famous Galvin family that owned the Clare Champion and ran the Clare Champion for many years. Claremen were in the Veterinary Corps, the Royal Engineers, and then the Army Service Corps, the Labour Battalion. There were lots of chaplains from Clare. This any person I kind of put a green tint to is invariably from Killaloe, and these are all chaplains from Clare. So these are just a few battles that I'd mention. Etru is famous. It was, as we were saying earlier, when the Germans came into Mons, the British Expeditionary Force retreated back to Paris. And on the way back, there was a place called Etru, where the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Munster Fusiliers held the Germans for long enough for the Expeditionary Force to retreat. The Expeditionary Force retreated back to the Marne, just north of Paris. The Germans split their army for some reason, and that opened a gap for the British and French to go through, and they drove the Germans back up to Flanders again. And that's where the rest of the war ended for the rest of the year, where it was a stalemate for the rest of the 4 years. Rudabad, this is another famous battle for the 2nd Munster Fusiliers. I was there twice on a lonely, dark roadside. I might add, this is a Tipperary man who's the priest, the chaplain. This man is from Cork. He survived the war. This man, I think, was from Kildare. He was killed a few months later. This was the morning of a battle. Difference between a Catholic chaplain and any of the other chaplains in World War I was that the Catholic chaplains always went to the front. It was very important for an Irish soldier for two things. One, that he had a rosary beads, and the second was that he was given the last rites. If he had those two things, he fought incredibly bravely. So on a lonely, dark roadside, lit up now and then by flashes from our own German flares, rose to heaven the voices of 800 men singing that glorious hymn, Hail Queen of Heaven. Every man had a rosary beads out, reciting the prayers in response to Father Gleeson. He then went down amongst them, blessing and encouraging them. At dawn the next morning, in the short period of attack, the monsters lost 19 officers and 374 men. That evening, those who survived returned to the same place for prayer. As I say, I've been there once, and I actually broke out my iPhone and played Hail Queen of Heaven right on the spot that they did, that they sang it 104 years ago. Now we have Ypres, Flanders, and the Claremen who died there, 104 of them. And then we're into Messine and Passchendaele, 49 died. All these were from Killaloe, who died in Passchendaele. It was brutal. two battles here, Messines and Passchendaele. Messines was the prelude, extremely well run. Extremely well run by a man, General Plumer. Extremely well planned. It was over in 4 or 5 days. Famous in that the 16th Irish Division and the 36th Irish, or the 16th Ulster Division and the 36th, sorry, let me get this right, the 36th Ulster Division and the 16th Irish Division fought side by side, virtually 12,000 men, all Irish, going up to take the town of Wyesheet, or Wyesheet as they pronounce in Belgium. But then it came to Passchendaele, the battle after it, which was the absolute opposite, no planning, complete misery. It was actually Douglas Higgs, who was the same man who was in charge of the Somme. He then handed over to Sir Hubert Gough, who again was Irish. He was also opposed to Home Rule, and he also was involved in the Curragh Mutiny. The only thing you can say about Passchendaele, it was a disaster, but at the very same time, the French had mutinied, believe it or not, 50 divisions, virtually 500,000 men. Germans didn't know it for some reason, and the British were trying to keep the Germans occupied until the French got their act together again. So now we're in Gallipoli, over 3,000 men, Irishmen died in Gallipoli, 8,500 Australians, 2,721 New Zealanders. They landed on the 25th of April, all of them. It's, as I'm sure you know, that's Anzac Day in Australia and New Zealand. Very much a nation-forming day. So again, we have Claremen who died at the Somme, 77 of them. And this is the Somme on the first day. This was the first day. And then there were 13 different battles, believe it or not, in the Somme over 3.5 months. And Claremen fought in all of them. There's a booklet again in the Clare Library all about the Somme and the Claremen who fought in it. These are the Claremen who died, excuse me. These are the Claremen who died at the Somme. Then we'll go on to Salonika. Lots of all these Claremen died there. We're in Mesopotamia, or Iraq, as we call it today. Excuse me. And then these are the 3 men from Killaloe who died in Iraq or Mesopotamia. And then we have, you know, the tragedy of the RMS Leinster. 697 killed. It was crossing from Dunleary to Holyhead, and it was hit by 3 torpedoes, 697 killed. This was the only Killaloe man on that ship. The Lusitania, again, months after it went down, these were all Claremen who died in it. And then months after, the bodies came around the coast and were coming onto the shores of Clare. This, I think, is the most amazing story. Has to go down and meet, for me anyway. 3 local soldiers returning from leave gave the rifles away to the Irish volunteers in Ennis after having met Countess Markovich on a train journey from Kilrush to Ennis. So 2 of them were in the Munster Fusiliers. One of them was an Australian. The Australian got wrapped across the knuckles. One of them, one of the Kilrush men, who was also in the Royal Munster Fusiliers, they really did very little because he had lost at least one brother in the war. But then there was Patrick Keane, the 3rd one. So he was lucky. He had a choice of being court-martialed in Ireland or on the front. At the front, he decided to go to the front, and sure enough, this is the man who was in charge of the court-martial, Robert Kane. Who lived in Dublin but had property in Tulla, and instead of having him executed, his sentence was, believe it or not, his sentence was commuted, a death sentence, to continuous frontline service in view of the large number of his family that were serving. He was placed in a foxhole, believe it or not, between the lines until he was going to be killed in action. He waited in this solitary post for several days until one night he detected an officer who was on a reconnaissance and trapped and wounded in the enemy barbed wire. He crawled under fire released the officer and dragged him back to safety in the lines. For this, Keane was reprieved, and he survived the war and went on to live a long life. So now we come to Killaloe Ballina. I like the color version of these new colorized pictures. And I've just, this booklet again is available on the Clare Library website. I'd just like to give you the streets and houses of Killaloe, 40 men from Killaloe Ballina who died in the Great War, a list, an alphabetic list of all those men and women who participated in the war from Killaloe Ballina, and then I've just popped in at the end the men and women from Killaloe who died in World War II and the emergency. So if we go through the streets of Killaloe and Abbey Street, we had Frank Hope. He died in 1918. He was in the Medal Corps. There was Bridge Street, Ballina. A man called Patrick Hennigan. It's seemingly that he was the first soldier in the British Army to use a hand grenade in World War I. There was Michael Marr, who died in Mesopotamia. We're into Valley Valley. The two brothers, one of them was killed. Ronald Parker, he was killed at the Marne. That's where we're back earlier on, where again the British Expeditionary Force was retreating from Mons back to Paris, and they stopped the Germans at the Marne. That's where he died. And then, as we were saying earlier, Colonel Parker, who was easily the most decorated soldier from Killaloe Ballina. Then there's also John Francis Byrne. He died in 1918. There's Henry Lefroy. We discussed him earlier. He's the man who was the recruiting officer in Killaloe. He enlisted 112 men. And he was also in charge of the ex-servicemen's land trust in 1923, which we'll discuss now in a second. These are all from the Canal Bank. Joe Ives, he died of disease, tuberculosis of the spine, while on active duty in Egypt. Michael McAvoy died in 1916 in Mesopotamia. Joseph Noonan died in 1915. Then we men from Carriage Lane, Church Street. Just popped in the Bishop of Killaloe there. And then there's the cottage, Lieutenant Keogh died from wounds 1918. And then William Ger Keogh died in Mesopotamia. There's Friends Hollow, Gerald Lefroy died on the Somme. He's on the majestic, his name is on the majestic People Memorial, biggest memorial in the world. And then there's John Street, Killaloe. John McInerney died in Passchendaele. The Main Street, Arthur Flynn, he died in September 1918. And then we have New Street, Sergeant Patrick Danaher. He died on the Somme. He's again on the majestic People Memorial. I'll show it to you in a minute. And then we're in Newtown. Patrick Hogan died May 1916. Francis Noonan, sorry now. And then John Scanlon, US soldier, and he died in July 1918. And then, of course, there are the soldiers' houses in Killaloe and Ballina. And I might add, I'd like to thank Una Queers and, of course, Sean. A huge amount of the information I have in this booklet are from Una and Sean. So the soldiers' houses in Killaloe, I'm sure you all know about them. There were 6 in Flanders Road, 4 in Hill Road, 4 in Creeper Row, I hope I pronounced that right, and 2 in Ballina, and 19 houses in Newtown. They were all built by Major Henry Lefroy, the man we discussed a minute ago, and it was the first scheme in the country for building houses it was the first scheme built in Ireland for ex-soldiers from World War I. And these are these houses. This is some of them in Newtown. There's 6 of them there in St. Flannan's Road. And thanks to Una, I got this list of all the occupiers of the ex-soldiers' cottages, as they were called, in 1925. And then we're in the jewel of the crown of Killaloe, most beautiful cathedral. And the monuments and memorials and graves, Ger Browne, it's his memorial, and then you have Henry Lefroy, you have Ronald Parker. This one I like, it's Ernest Brown, A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. The rich and poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all. He seemingly was a very respected, he owned the Clonboy estate, very respected by his tenants, a strong supporter of the co-op movement. He backed the Irish Volunteers in 1913, and during the World War I, he served with the British Army in East Africa, which was German East Africa. It's called Tanzania today. Then we're in St. Planet still. We have the pilot, John Henry McLaurin, as we discussed him earlier. The poor man, he was only 18. His died in an accident in training. And these are all these beautiful memorials. Outside then, the graveyard, very tragic, Michael McAvoy. He's buried in Basra in Iraq, but he's mentioned on his family grave, and also his son Michael died the 5th of July 1916 in Basra, Iraq, aged 18. And I've added John Charlesworth, who died in an accident. He accidentally drowned, very tragic, in Killaloe. We're back to Captain Lefroy again, to Tinarana, and then we're in Temple Kelly, Temple Hollow. And this is one of the graves. It's Paul Courtney, and he died on the 26th of July 1920. And then we have Joe Ives, or Joe Ives, who's buried there as well. It just very difficult to find his grave. Maybe someday somebody might find it for me and give me the photo. These are the medals won by Killaloe men in the war. We're talking about military medals, mentioned dispatches, Croix de Guerre, Order of Legion of Honor. These are the 40 Claremen mentioned on the memorial in Ennis. And we might go through them. Robert Baird, killed in action in the 1st of June 1918. He's buried at the Somme. John Baxter, killed in action 24th of April. He was killed in the Battle of Arras. He's buried in Pas de Calais. Martin Blake died of wounds in the Battle of Main Gate. That's one of the battles of Passchendaele, and he's buried in Poperinghe. John Francis Byrne, he died with the Australians of Pleurisy. He's a lot of died of illness, and they were buried in cemeteries close to the hospitals. This is the Colchester Cemetery and Crematorium. We're back to Joe Clancy. Joe's a native, I'm sure you know, of Kilkishen, died in Killaloe in 1961 and is buried in Killaloe at Religlua. Honestly, I thought I'd been to every cemetery in Clare, but obviously not. I thank Tomas, Dr. Tomas Cumnara, for this photograph, and someday maybe when we're all allowed out again, I'll get to that grave and take another photograph. So again, as we said earlier, that was his Distinguished Conduct Medal. Actually, in May 1920, after 21 days on hunger strike, Joe Clancy told the doctor, fought for the rights of small nations, and that I was now fighting for my own beloved land. That was in the Freeman's Journal, 13th of May 1920. And he famously said that he went on to fight in 4 wars. So Private John Cleary, again fighting with the Australians. He died on the 2nd of July, age 41, believe it or not. He had died of wounds received in action, gunshot wound to the head, compound fracture of the skull. Buried in Pas de Calais. James Courtney, which we discussed, is Temple Kelly. Patrick Danaher, killed in action, 5th of August at the Somme. And this is the majestic Tifa Memorial. Then this Patrick Fanning died of measles in the Connacht Hospital. He's only age 19. Arthur Flynn died on 27th of September 1918, Royal Munster Fusiliers, buried in Pas de Calais. John L. Francis fought with the, which was it now? He had the Royal Scots, the 11th Battalion. He's remembered on the Arras Memorial. James Gassan died the 5th of July 1918, age 40, buried in Le Havre. Frank Hogan, died the 1st of November 1918. He's buried in Clondudno. Corporal Patrick Hogan. He was born in Limerick but lived in Killaloe. He's killed in action 16th of May 1916, and he's buried out. He's remembered on the arrest memorial. William J. Holmes, killed in action 31st December 1915, aged 21, buried in Pas-de-Calais. Frank Hope, I have no idea where he's buried. Joe Ives, I know he's in Temple Kelly, but I still don't know. I don't have a picture, but I do have it at the Tipperary Studies gravestone inscriptions that tell me the number of the grave, but I unfortunately don't have a map to go with it. Lieutenant John Keogh, he died of wounds 22nd of March 1918 at the Somme. And then we had Gerard Keogh, died of wounds 20th of October 1918 in Iraq. He was taken to Khartoum and he died there. Private James Larkin died of wounds 24th of May 1915, aged 29, buried in Ypres. And then we have John Larkin, who died of tubercular meningitis in a sanatorium in Australia. We're back to the Somme again, back to Teedful, Gerald Rafoy. This is, I took this from the Killaloe anthology by Sean Kearse. And this is the only man I could find that fitted Sean's description. And he's on the Meningate Memorial. And I was in the Royal Horse and Field Artillery. Again, we're back to Cadet John Henry McLaurin. I'm very familiar with that family from a previous project. Know them very well. It took a while, but I found his grave in Ennis, and that's the memorial. We're back to Iraq again. This is the Basra Memorial. Michael Marr died 11th of August 1917. This man, again, was killed in Iraq as well, but he's not in the memorial. He's in the Basra War Cemetery, which I believe has been absolutely destroyed from the Iraqi wars. He died on the 4th of July, and as I was saying earlier, he's mentioned on the family grave. Now, amazingly, I came across this poem written about him, written by his father. I think it was 2003. It's 3 pages. I'm only going to give you 2 verses. Michael followed Redmond in the promise of Home Rule, and that's why his detractors say that Michael was a fool to believe the propaganda that small nations would be free, when in Ireland's case their lordships ensured this would not be. And then the last one, that's from Dungeons of Ignorance and Hate We Seek Release. The sacrificial Michaels are our guarantee of peace. Why? Because if we don't learn from them, they'll have surely died in vain and condemn us to repeat these slaughters time and time again. And it was written by his father in 2003. Beautiful tribute. So we're in Gallipoli now. Michael McGee, killed in action, 26th of April 1915, age 36. He's on the Hellas Memorial, huge memorial. This is incredible. This is that first day, the 5th of April, or 1915, as I say, Anzac Day, when they were landing further up the coast. 2,000, believe it or not, 1,500 Royal Munster Fusiliers, 500 Royal Dublin Fusiliers came off this. They came down those gangways, and they were trying to get on these barges to cross onto the beach. Honestly, they didn't make it. They were absolutely decimated. Seemingly, a plane flew over the water later afterwards, and it was just red. It was tragic. So again, Patrick McGee, killed in action 28th of April 1916. He's buried in Dud Corner in Luce. Possibly the most beautiful cemetery in the world. As far as I know, it's the biggest, 68,000 or whatever. All these are graves, and their graves. And then that's the memorial. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely breathtaking. And John McInerney is remembered on the memorial, of course, where he died in Passchendaele, the Battle of Passchendaele. This is Lieutenant J. McKeough. I have no idea where he's buried. Where Albert Muir, killed in action 16th of September 1916. We're back to the majestic Teedful Memorial at the Somme. And again, Joseph Niall, killed in action 21st of March 1918. buried in a ras. There's a lovely picture of his grave. He was killed in Operation Michael, Operation Michael, or the Kaiserschlacht, as they was called, or the German offensive, whichever way you want to call it. It was March 1918. The Germans put in virtually 500,000 men to break through the lines. They went for a gap between the French and German lines. Unfortunately, the Irish 16th Division was in the way, got decimated, and went in about 30-40 kilometers, and then were held at the Marne, actually, by the Americans. But that's another story. Francis Noonan died at Rue-de-Bois, most tragic of battles, most beautiful painting of it. He killed in action 9th May 1915, aged 20. Beautiful cemetery. I've been to nearly all these cemeteries. Beautiful place. Joseph Noonan, killed in action 17th of June 1915, buried in Pas-de-Calais. Patrick O'Brien, killed in action 21st of March near Ronsay. Again, we're back to the German spring offensive, as we were 2 or 3 back there, and he was also killed in that. Ronald Parker, again, he was killed at the Marne. That's his brother. This is unusual. This took me a while to find. Terribly difficult, but I found him. So, see me what happened. He was born in Killaloe, died in India on the 14th of November, and he was buried here in Elizabeth Cemetery. But what happened after 1947, after the Indians got independence? The British government decided it could no longer maintain the old cantonment cemeteries. It was an impossibility for the Commission, the Commonwealth Graves Commission, to take over all the sites which had served the British in India for 300 years. It was a difficult decision between abandoning them or moving them. The decision was made, and the dead of the First World War were left undisturbed, and their names were inscribed in memorials in the new cemeteries, and the Commonwealth Grave Commissions took over these. But with a lot of research, I found a fake picture. Now, he's one of these graves. I don't know which one, but at least, and that's the entrance to it. William Glasgow, Robertson Glasgow, he's buried in Latour. James Ryan, killed in action 5th July 1916. He went over the top on the 1st of July. And he survived. Mind you, he only survived 4 days. And he's buried in Picardy. And then we're back to the beautiful Tyncott Memorial. And this is William Ryan, killed in action 9th of October 1917, aged 27. Now we're into the Americans here, killed in action 29th of July 1918. Now the difference between the Americans and the British and Irish is that the Americans did allow families bring the bodies home if they wished. That was not allowed. I think half of the 110,000 that died were repatriated, including some back to Clare. That was not allowed with the British and Irish. I might add, in this battle, a mere casualties of 38,500 people. 7 Claremen died. Again, we're in the Merchant Navy here. First Mate Arthur Sims. He was born in Killaloe, but he lived in County Down. He died on the 17th of May 1917, age 26, and he also lost 2 brothers in World War I. John Sullivan, killed in action 29th of May 1916 near Hullock and buried in Pas-de-Calais. So look, I can't go through these. This is an alphabetical list. I'd ask you if you wish. We've gone through most of them anyway, but I'd like to, if you don't mind, if you wish, to just download the booklet, print it out, read it in your own time. You can just go to any printing office and they'll just bind it for you for less than €3 or €4, and you'll have your own ready-made booklet. So this is the alphabetical list of, again, all the Killaloe and Ballina people. I've just popped in World War II here. The emergency, this is a picture of the LDF in 1944. This is a lady called Anne Josephine Brazil. She was killed. She was born in Killaloe in 1927. She was killed in the second Blitz in Croydon. A V1 fell on the St. Mary Hotel in Dale Road, Purley, next to Purley Railway Station on the 31st of October 1944, and 17 people were killed, including Anne Brazel. This is even more tragic, if that's possible. This is James Dominic Niall. It's after Dunkirk. The British are evacuating all their troops and civilians, and they hired out this Cunard boat, the RMS Lancastria. So it was absolutely packed. So it was a Cunard liner. It was a requisition by the UK government, and was sunk off the French port of Saint-Nazaire on the 17th of June 1940 during Operation Ariel, the evacuation of British nationals and troops from France 2 weeks after Dunkirk. It normally only held 1,300, but they have no idea how many people are on it, but it's anything up to 5,800 people drowned. And 2 of them were Claremen. One of them was James Dominic Niall. And he's also mentioned at the family gravestone in St. Flannan's. This is another man who's named on a gravestone in St. Flannan's, William Hugh Niall. He was killed in action 3rd of May 1944, age 35, buried in Madras in India. This is Sergeant J. O'Brien now. He's born in County Clare. He's buried in Temple Hollow now. I've no idea why. He was killed in a training accident when his Halifax unfortunately collided with another Halifax on the 19th of August 1943. Both crews were killed, and 2 people on the ground were badly burned. But he was buried in Ballina. I have no idea why. There's another grave in St. Flannan's, and he was in the RAF. He died, I know, after World War II in 1958. They had the wrong word. They had the wrong name. It took me a while to figure this out too. They had Harbiana, whatever that means, but it was actually Habaniya. It's a war cemetery in Iraq, and that's it down there. So if you haven't enough now with the 40 or the 30 plus booklets on World War I, there's another 19, believe it or not, on the Clare Revolution 1916-1923. And I'm just showing you 2 of them because they're relevant for all of you who are interested in Killaloe and Ballina. This is a booklet on the RAC barracks in Killaloe, and then this is the auxiliaries and temporary constables. It's actually in 2 booklets, and the second one is their individual profiles. Now, when I say it's forensic, it really does go into incredible detail on all of them. In the auxiliaries, literally from the day they were born to the day they died. But really, what I'd like to do now, if you bear with me, oh yes, this is another booklet, but it just gives, just took the front page here. It just gives an idea of where all the Claremen are buried. 3 in Scotland, 39 in Ireland, 3 in Wales, 290 in France, 13 in Greece, 1 in Sudan, 1 in Tanzania, 2 in South Africa, 2 in Australia, New Zealand, 5 in the US, 6 in Egypt, 3 in India, 2 in Burma, 1 in Pakistan, 5 in Israel or Palestine, 14 in Iraq, Mesopotamia, 1 in Canada, 48 in Turkey, to do with obviously Gallipoli, 2 in Germany, they were prisoners of war, Belgium, to all of them, and then 2, and then there's 53 in England, all attached virtually to hospitals. So I'd like to finish, if I may, with this is a timeline of all the Claremen who died in the war. And I'm just going to go through it, but what I'd like to do, if you bear with me, I'd like to just run through it, but I'm just going to play the Green Fields of France, which I think is a great anti-war song by Eric Bogle. And I'd just like you just to get a handle on the enormity of this tragedy, which was World War I.
Well, how do you do, young Willie McBride? Do you mind if I sit here down by your graveside and rest for a while, neath the warm summer sun? I've been walking all day and I'm nearly done. I see by your gravestone you are only 19 when you joined the Great Fallen in 1916. I hope you died well and I hope you died clean. Our young Willie McBride, was it slow and obscene? Did he beat the drum slowly? Did he play the fife slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? And did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? Did you leave a wife or a sweetheart behind? In some faithful heart is your memory enshrined. Although you died back in 1916, in that faithful heart are you forever 19? Or are you a stranger without even a name, enclosed and forever behind the glass frame, in an old photograph torn, battered and stained and faded to yellow in the brown leather frame? Did he beat the drum slowly? Did he play the fife slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? And did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? The sun, now it shines on the green fields of France. There's a warm summer breeze, it makes the red poppies dance. And look how the sun shines from under the clouds. There's no gas, no barbed wire, there's no gun firing now. But here in this graveyard, it's still no man's land. The countless white crosses stand mute in the sand. To man's blind indifference to his fellow man, to a whole generation that were butchered and damned. Did he beat the drum slowly? Did he play the fife slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? And did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? Ah, young Willie McBride, I can't help wondering why to those that lie here know why did they die? And did they believe when they answered the call? Did they really believe that this war would end war? Well, the sorrow, the suffering, the glory, the pain, the killing and dying were all done in vain. For young Willie McBride, it all happened again, and again and again and again and again. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? Did they beat the drums slowly? Did they play the fife slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? And did the pipes play the flowers of the forest?
So just one last thing now, if I can, I'd just like to show you another of the most beautiful memorials. I hope you can see this now. This is, if there's any problem here, Arlene, please tell me.
We've no sound yet, Ger.
Yeah, don't worry now, I have that now.
Okay,
so
perfect.
This is Ypres, the most beautiful place. Now, after World War I in 1918, seemingly it was so flat that you could sit in a horse and see one end to the other. It was a kind of a medieval town, it was. It was completely rebuilt. That's the cathedral. Absolutely, I would recommend anybody go to Ypres. It's surrounded by the graves within 5 to 10 kilometers of 250,000 men. And they have 2 bridges, and this is one of them. Now, this is the bridge that led up to all the battle sites, including Passion Day. Hundreds of thousands of men crossed the bridge. So when they decided to build the memorial in the 1920s, this is where they put the memorial. 60,000 plus, 31 of them Claremen. And every night at 8 o'clock, including tonight, even in coronavirus times, they shut this bridge. And for just 10 to 15 minutes, 3 buglers come along to play the last post and reveille. During the coronavirus, there's no crowds allowed, but they were not going to stop the tradition. And I'm just going to show you a clip. It was taken in 2017. The reason I want to show it to you is because it features the Irish Army and the Royal Irish Regiment from the north. It's an Irish night. Every night has a different theme. And it's any night of any week, of any month, of any year. If you go to Ypres at 8 o'clock, they will close that bridge. They will close the road. It will be only allowed, nobody will be allowed through it until the ceremony is over on the last 10 or 15 minutes. So I'd just like to give you a flavor of this beautiful memorial.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. word tomorrow, we give on today.
So I think we're there, Arlene.
Okay, thanks a million, Ger. That's great. I'm going to hand you over to Deborah now, and she's going to read out some of the questions and comments and stuff that are in the chat. Okay.
Thanks, Arlene. Ger, that was amazing. Thank you so much, and all your research. And it's fantastic that it's on Clare Library for everyone to access. You've done a great service to Clare, really. These people, for anyone to go and try and find all this information themselves, it wouldn't be possible, I don't think. You've done some wonderful work. Thank you. We have some questions for you. Someone asked, are there, oh, there we go. Are there ex-servicemen's houses in other towns in County Clare?
There's, I'm sure you might have heard of Shellshock Road. It's in Kilrush.
Actually, Patty Waldron had told us about
Patty, yes, of course, yes, 6 houses. I think there was, I can't remember, they were in groups of 3, I can't remember. I always remember that when they built those houses, they lead-lined the ceilings. And I think they somehow insulated the roofs, because anybody who comes back from World War I is so, if they do come back physically okay, it was just incredibly brutal. And to say they had nightmares afterwards is only putting it mildly. So they had to soundproof the houses. So when they were screaming at night, and they were screaming at night in their nightmares, that they wouldn't wake up all the others. So I always remember that about Kilrush. They were built in Ennis. You would go into the Ennis booklet, all the soldiers' houses in Ennis are there. McNamara built up in Ennistimon, just going up to Churchill on the right-hand side. He built at least 10 soldiers' houses. I think there was meant to be a few others, but I really couldn't find them. But they would have been the main soldiers' houses. I don't think they'd have anything to do with Lefroy, because I didn't find them mentioned or in the records with his name. So they must have been done through a different person, obviously.
Very good. Katrina Gleason has asked us here, it's not a Killaloe Ballina question, but she asked, would there have been female recipients of the Victoria Cross, or was it just for soldiers fighting?
Good question. I've never, well, I'm only familiar with the Irish ones. As I say, let me think now, 1,400 Victoria Crosses were awarded. 600 to the English, virtually whatever, 180, 190 to the Irish. And in all the names I've went through, I've never seen a woman mentioned.
Fighting, would they? They would have been physically.
Well, I wouldn't, yes, exactly. I mean, they started them, Queen Victoria started it after the Crimean War, where she melted down all the cannons from Sebastopol. And that's what they were made of. A huge amount of them were won by Claremen in Crimea. And then later on in the Indian Mutiny, or depending which way you want to look at the first Indian War of Independence. But I've never come across a woman who. But then I could be wrong. I'm not familiar. I'm only familiar with the 180 Irish. I have no idea who won the other 1,200.
Fair enough. Padraig Condon says to us, Private Martin Maloney, 2nd Battalion RMF, was from Portrush and was killed in action on the 13th of October 1915. He has no known grave, but is listed on panel 127 of the Luce Memorial, Dud Corner Cemetery, France. I know Portrush in Tipperary, so you probably didn't cover?
Yeah, you see, this is a very tricky night for me because I've done a lot of lectures in Clare, but when I've never actually zoomed into the Tipperary names, and I would be very keen if people had names of people who were born in Ballina who wouldn't have featured in Tom Burnell's book on the Clare War Dead, or wouldn't have featured on the different search engines under Clare. And as I say, with Ballina included tonight, I knew there was a little gap there in my knowledge because I'd never gone through Tipperary.
Okay, and Portroe is a little bit out of Ballina anyway. But there isn't a Ger Browne in Tipperary, is there?
Your work.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think there's very few counties in Ireland. Wexford have done it, Leitrim have done it, but they don't kind of give it to you in a list that you can read, or you can't print it. You have to just input the name, and then out will pop all the information on that name, but they won't give you the overall picture, which I like to do for obvious reasons, because the picture is so big. Tragedy is enormous, and the Clare involvement is huge. So this is why I've done it this way, where I think it's important that every person should be seen, and it should be printable, and it should be in booklets.
It is wonderful what you've done, and the background research on each person. Like it is amazing work, really. We've actually someone, Liam or O'Sortel, is saying excellent work, a stunning reminder of our complex history, especially with World War I veterans being prominent in the War of Independence. Good to be reminded of the women who served as well. Thank you, Ger. Another person is saying great stuff. Thanks, Ger. Another question, do we know what motivated most to sign up? Did they believe in fighting for small nations? Was it an adventure, or simply to put food on the table?
Oh, I'm sure it was a combination of everything. But as we know, what did we say? 208,000 enlisted, 60,000 were already in the British forces. We know that regiments, volunteers, the Irish Volunteers and the Ulster Volunteers, and they had two different, one was pro-Home Rule, the other was obviously against Home Rule. So we know what their motivations were. So then you're left with around 80,000 who presumably had no, who could have been doing it for any reason. I mean, you have to put yourself in the mindset of 1914. If nearly all of them were under 20, the average age of those who died must have been at the most 18 or 19. They're all children. Okay, they're 18 or 19. There's no job prospects. There's no social welfare. There's nothing. So there's adventure. There's money. The average wage was very small. There was no permanent jobs. The only jobs they would have been as labourers. So, you have to, there was a huge amount of recruitment early on the war when everybody thought it'd be over quickly, but for obvious reasons, the numbers dramatically reduced as it became obvious that it wasn't going to end quickly. But I'm sure people did enlist for a myriad of reasons. It's just impossible for us to sit back and judge them 100 years later when we're sitting on our couch. And, they had no luxuries back then. They had no vaccines, there's no medicines, they had no antibiotics. Life was short and brutal. And you just did not want to end up in a workhouse. So, I would just let everybody make up their own mind.
Yes, that's true. There's another question here. What is the best source to see what regiments the soldiers served in, and that would show where they came from to make identifying them a little easier? I think all your documents are sorted in all kinds of ways, aren't they, on Clare Library?
If they're from Clare, seriously, I don't think there are many missing. It's all done and dusted. If they're outside of Clare now, that's going to be a problem. But the search engines are absolutely, Ancestry is incredible. And then if you really want to go a step above Ancestry, you go into Foldtree.com. Foldtree is their next next level upwards, they call full 3 because that's the number of times the American flag is folded when a soldier dies and handed to their wives or relations. So they call it full3.com, and you pay extra on top of your ancestry.com subscription, and it's a superb website or a superb search engine. If you have a name, you see, the trick is you really have to have a name. More importantly than that, because there are going to be 100 names the same, 1,000, you're going to have to know the regiment, and ideally you'd have to know the serial number or his regimental number. And then if you have that, then that's a start. Now, the records variable are what are called the service records and the pension records. Now, unfortunately, a huge amount of them were destroyed in World War II, except for the officers. All other ranks, a huge amount of them were destroyed. But if you do find a service record or a pension record, you've hit the jackpot.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thanks, Ger. I don't think anyone can do what you've done, but it's useful to know where those sources of information are. Maybe, would you mind, we could get an email off you with the sources and we'll post it on the Society website.
But really the sources are
Ancestry.
The brilliant booklets written on the different towns, shown here, the Killaloe anthology, the newspapers related to your town or area, absolutely packed with information, incredibly important. And then obviously the search engines, it's a variety of sources. Yeah. You have to be prepared to read a lot of newspapers.
I know. Yeah.
And you have to, be very knowledgeable on the local history of where you live, and definitely to read all the booklets that are available.
Okay, thank you. Tomas McComera says, great lecture, Ger. Great lecture. Ger has done incredible work for County Clare. We should be grateful for the effort he has made, and it will serve young and old in the county for many years to come. And that's very, very true, Ger.
Oh, sure. Tomas is a former lecturer of mine and hopefully a good friend, and a genius and the most passionate historian I've ever met. Thank you, Tomas.
He taught you well. So will we open it up to the floor if anyone wants to ask any questions on Zoom? We see, is everyone muted maybe? I can't see people, Arlene. Can you see?
Yeah,
people?
I can see. Just, I suppose, if you unmute yourself, maybe if you wanted to ask a question. Or if everyone is
or
okay.
if you stop sharing a screen, Ger, then we can.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Sorry.
No
my mistake.
No, I can see people. I don't think. Yeah.
We just wanted to apologise for the clarity of the presentation. It worked in dress rehearsals, but maybe it was a bandwidth problem or something. But again, because Ger has all this information on Clare Library, you haven't missed anything. Listening to him was the important part, I think, and it's all there online for you to look at in your own time. So has anyone got any questions? Everyone's muted.
Yeah, no, I think everyone.
I've just checked there and it said no women have been awarded the VC. No women have been awarded the VC. The petition for awards for bad ballot is still included in the Victoria Cross. But there's no. I looked up Edith Caverill to see might she have it, but no, there's no women got the Victoria Cross.
Well, thanks, Frida. That's clarified. It
was very good, very interesting,
isn't it?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Very sad. Very, very sad.
Yeah, I know the McAvoy grave. I've seen it below in the church, and I remember Joe Clancy as a child, and I think my memory was that he was cross.
Really?
Yeah, well, he was old, maybe cranky. I thought when I was little.
Liam, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question there.
I was just wanted to say thanks very much for the opportunity and the whole lot. I actually became aware of the Killaloe Ballina Society the last couple of weeks, so I'm just wondering how long have you been going, and what other events have you been involved in, and what have I missed, I suppose, or what is there going to be any more talks or anything like that, or what's the plans?
Yeah, we've another talk planned.
Thanks again.
We've a talk planned for April. We were established in 2017, Arlene, August.
Yeah.
So we've had lots of public talks. We've had tours. We've put up signage around town and stuff. Do you live in the locality, Liam?
I'm in Crusheen, but I was only in Killaloe and Ballina for the first time in maybe a year or two ago only, down in Loughdurgan and that. So
when you're
I didn't. I'm actually from Dublin, so I've got to know Clare bit by bit.
Good.
I'd say the best thing, sorry, Deborah, the best thing would be maybe to go onto our website, killaloeballina.lhs.wordpress.com, and we have a load of blogs and links to events that we've done and oral histories and all that kind of thing. So you'll find out loads about us there.
And we're on social media as well, Liam. We're on Facebook.
I started following started following the page on Facebook. Yeah.
And we're on Twitter and Instagram. So we've them all bases covered.
Thank you.
We're very modern.
Actually, that's a question I have for Ger. Where is the memorial in Ennis, Ger?
Oh, it's just across from Glore.
Okay.
So if you're going into the temple or the back of the Temple Gate Hotel, or it's very near Dunn's. It's just literally a stone's throw from the back entrance to Dunn's stores.
Okay. It's somewhere to go when we're allowed to go again. Yeah,
exactly.
It's a very, very nice place to visit. I was actually there for the psalm ceremony on July the 1st, actually. So yeah, it's very, very kind of moving. Well, it was a smaller ceremony this year with lockdown, but there wasn't the usual big ceremony for Armistice Day or anything like that. But obviously, hopefully, this year it'll be better, you know.
Just got another comment in there for people, maybe they've seen it, just from Padraig to say, well done everyone, excellent lecture, all these men should never be forgotten. Yeah, and I think definitely the Clare men won't be now, thanks to Ger's years of work.
It was very poignant when you played the music over all the dead, Ger.
Yeah, brilliant sound.
The extent of it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually at the grave of William McBride, but that's another story.
We'll have to get your back again. Yeah.
It looks like we're okay question-wise, Deborah. I think.
Okay, so
you can now forever hold your peace.
We'd like to thank Ger again, really, for all your work and for your continued work. I think he's other research going on at the moment, haven't you, Ger, on the War of Independence and the Civil War? Yeah,
that's actually finished the Great War 2 years ago. I'm currently doing the Clare Revolution 1916 to 1923, which features the nominal roles of all the brigades, the East Clare Brigade, very important, and obviously the Mid Clare Brigade, the West Clare Brigade, coming them on, all the pension records, all the medal applications, the witness statements. There's a huge amount of material there available on the Clare Library website, and then there's also a huge amount of information on the RSC, on the 72 RSC barracks in Clare between 16 and 21. There's 2,000 profiles on all the RSC in Clare and the auxiliaries and Black and Tens, and I'm currently just completing the British Army in Clare, which is mainly the Royal Scots on one side and the Oxford and Buckinghamshire Regiment on the other, and hopefully that'll be going online over the next few months, or in the next few months.
Fantastic, really great, Ger. Thank you. I will just let you know our next talk is on April 18th, I think. And it is, April 21st, I'll have to look at my phone. We'll be issuing the poster April 21st, and it's on the mighty Matt McGrath, and it's Henry O'Connell, who lives in Ballina, is giving us that talk. Matt McGrath was an Olympic hammer thrower, and from Curramore up past Boher. So that's it. So thank you all for attending. You're really good. And I hope you enjoyed it. Myself and Arlene both hope so. Did you? Yeah?
Everyone is muted. So I see thumbs up, so we're doing well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a million, Ger. Bye now.
Good week.
Good night, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night. Now.